Please hold whilst we connect you to Redacted.
This is Lucy Bishop.
This is Louis Mills.
This is Nancy Malik, Nancy Malik, Nancy Malik, Nancy Malik, Nancy Malik, Nancy Malik, Nancy Malik. And you're listening to Redacted, 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 Redacted.
Today, we're joined by Nancy Malik. After already building a colourful career in Australia, Nancy has followed her dreams to the culturally rich country of Japan and become a design expert in CMF styling and trends. Currently, Nancy works with Lenovo, one of the most innovative producers of PCs and other tech. Nancy, welcome to the show. Who is Nancy Malik in 100 words or less?
I was born in Egypt and grew up in Australia, lived in Sydney and Melbourne, and now I live in Tokyo. I'm an industrial designer and I also love fashion and art and everything creative.
So Nancy, how did you discover industrial design? Do you have an origin story you'd like to share?
My parents actually are both architects, and I grew up mostly as an only child, which meant that my childhood was listening to them talk about architecture, being taken to architecture sites or shops as they were building a house. The dinner table conversation was always about design. So I think that really influenced me, but I actually studied fashion when I left school. So I went to UTS. I studied fashion design, and I had this love-hate relationship with the course. I loved how creative it was, but it was also really subjective. And when I did internships, I found that the kind of work that was happening in Australia at the time in the industry didn't really appeal to me that much. So I actually took a completely different track. I worked as a youth worker for a while. I'd done some volunteer work in that area. So I went down that path for about 6 years, and I got to the point where I just felt like, man, I really need to get back into design. I was spending my spare time working on creative projects and just really feeling that itch. And I remembered that when I was studying fashion design, I'd seen the industrial designers.
You'd seen those weirdos.
And I'd seen the cool car drawings, and I had no interest in drawing cars, but I was like, that seems like a really interesting way to do design. I really love design, but fashion just wasn't quite right. And despite my parents' efforts to try and drag me back into doing architecture like them, they managed actually to get my brother to do it, but he's very happily an architect now. I just thought ID would be cooler, and I like small products. I like the scale of it. I like the fact that it's focused on humans and the things that we use and everyday objects.
It's kind of interesting comparing it to architecture because it's so small on one hand, but there's so many of them, where it's the opposite with architecture. They're so large and bigger than life, but there's maybe one, maybe two of them.
Yeah, that's right.
What were some of your creative projects that you were doing? Were they product or more fashion or artistic at the time?
Before I went back and did ID.
Yeah. What were you mucking around with?
Because I was working as a youth worker at the time, we were doing spray painting workshops. So I was doing stenciling in my own time. And I still do make my own clothes sometimes. So still mucking around with fashion, doing a bit of graphic design, just anything I could get my hands on.
Was the stenciling something you did in Melbourne, or is there a bit of a street art scene happening in Sydney as well?
It was in Sydney. There's a little bit. Melbourne definitely tops the Sydney scene, but yeah, there's a little bit of a scene, especially around the inner west.
Very cool. I used to go around and do some paste ups in Melbourne. I used to print them at RMIT and then take them and stick them up.
Yeah, I really miss street art. Actually, there's hardly any in Tokyo. They're very strict about it. It's not really culturally used that much.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like you know how in Melbourne people will have murals done on their buildings. It's not really a thing here, so it's a bit sad.
It is really sad.
You might have to change it. Just get the stencils out over there.
So get arrested.
Yeah, maybe be careful. Maybe it's not a good idea. Did you go back to uni and start a new degree from there?
Yeah, so I went back to UTS, and because I'd already studied at UTS, it meant that I had a lot of subject exemptions in terms of all of that initial design history and interdisciplinary design stuff. I could get all of those credits, and that meant I could keep renting a place in the city and then I could keep working part-time, and it wasn't such a big deal to spend another 4 years at uni. It still took 4 years, but it was 4 years part-time, so it was a bit more chilled. And I really loved it, actually. I felt a bit addicted to studying design at the end of it. I was like, oh, maybe I can do the other 2 courses. I'll do interior and bizcomm as well, but no.
Do it all.
こんにちは、マリクナンシーです。この番組はREDACTEDです。
Hey everyone, this episode is sponsored by PCBWay, the go-to destination for printed circuit board prototyping, low-volume production, and PCB assembly. If your team is working on electronics and you're in need of prototype PCBs, I can't recommend PCBWay enough. You can get a quote instantly, even if your circuit board schematics aren't finished yet. They can also help you with injection molded, 3D printed, sheet metal, and vacuum cast prototypes. PCBWay is the circuit board prototyper of choice for companies like Samsung, Siemens, Honeywell, Tesla, and Apple, but you don't have to be a big company to use their services. I've personally used their service to instantly get quotes and have assembled PCB prototypes delivered right to my door in a timely manner. On top of all that, PCBWay is so excited to be working with us, they're offering a special discount just for our listeners. When you get a quote from PCBWay, be sure to use our promo code REDACTED for a special discount on us. You can find PCBWay in our episode description or go to PCBWay.com.
Redacted.
Before you broke into the field, you had a few internships. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
I was lucky, actually. One of my flatmates was an industrial designer when I was studying, and he worked at D3 Design, a little consultancy in Sydney. So I did an internship there in my second year. And doing that, I just found that really helpful to understand what the gaps were between my skills as a second year student. Obviously, I hadn't finished studying yet, but they could help me see what some of my weaknesses were and what I could work on. And I could also see what it was like to work in a consultancy, especially a small one, as a lot of them are in Sydney. After doing that, I really saw the value of internships, and I did a few more. So I also spent a few weeks at VERT, and I spent a few weeks at a place called Courtesy of the Artist. They focus on jewelry. At the end of my third year, I got a summer internship position at ResMed. So this was quite different. It's a big in-house, very engineering-focused company working on medical products, completely different to the other internships. That was all really, really helpful in both putting something on my resume before I had graduated, but also helping me understand the kinds of places I'd be interested in working afterwards.
Sounds like there's heaps of variety in all those places. So it must have been a good learning curve for understanding where you wanted to go.
Yeah, definitely. I know that internships can be hard just in terms of giving up your time. And if you're working part-time and needing to pay rent and stuff, I get the struggle there. But even if it's just a week or a couple of days a week for a couple of weeks, I think it's so helpful to get that insight. And also just to put something on your resume to show that you've got that initiative, to show that you have a bit of a taste of what the real world is like, was really helpful for me.
I think something else is you start making connections in the industry too.
Yes.
Maybe they're not necessarily in a place to hire you, but maybe they know someone who's hiring and looking for someone who's young and eager.
Yeah, definitely.
How did you get onto those internships? Were they advertising they wanted somebody for that short period of time? Or did you reach out to them to initiate that?
A lot of them actually were through contacts, as Lucy was saying. My flatmate was an industrial designer. I already knew him. And then my friend from fashion, she married someone who studied industrial design at the same time as us. So he was the one working at VERT and got me the internship there. Courtesy of the Artist and ResMed, they advertised. So that was, me applying to them. Another thing that I did was in my fourth year, I did a collaboration with Design by Them, and they also went to UTS and they went off and created their own furniture company. And for my fourth year project, I was able to use them in the mentoring capacity. So that was another way through the uni to connect with the outside world.
Awesome. So from the internships, what happened from there?
After I finished, I did a little summer school job at UTS. They do an introduction to design for high schoolers, and that led me to being able to tutor part-time at UTS. So that was my first job. It took me a while. The course finishes in December, and then I started working in May, actually for a company. So for that 5 months, I was looking for work. It took some time and just working at UTS tutoring part-time. But I eventually got a job at IDE in Sydney. They're a consultancy. Probably about 80% of their work is medical and then 20% is consumer. That was my first full-time job. I did that for a few years, and then I wanted to look a bit more into consumer products and experience a bit more of a faster pace in terms of the projects. With medical devices, there's a lot of requirements, a lot of documentation. It takes a lot longer. So I looked and found the job at Outerspace Design and worked there for a few years as well.
Nice. Was there much difference between the Sydney vibe and the Melbourne vibe as far as working at different consultancies? I suppose they're quite different anyway.
Yeah, the consultancies are really different. Melbourne felt more relaxed, but I'm not sure if I'd been at a more medical device focused place, maybe it would have felt the same. So it's a bit hard to compare. Redacted.
How did you go from working in Australia to working in Japan?
That was quite a long road. The first time I went to Japan, I just went with a friend. She was the one that initiated the trip. We traveled around, but I absolutely fell head over heels for the place. I really loved it and came back to save up money and go again and save up money and go again. It was like I had found my soul country. That was before I went back and studied ID. So when it came to studying ID and doing my major project, I decided that I'd love to study Japanese design principles. So I did my dissertation looking at Japanese designers and design principles and the history of craft here, and then designing a collection of products for my major projects that reflected those principles. After that, the next time I came, I decided to meet with a couple of designers. I must have written to a dozen or so people, but 2 people met up with me, a Japanese guy with a small studio of his own and a British guy who'd been working and living here for a while and had a consultancy here. His advice was to get my language to conversational level and get about 5 years experience as an industrial designer before trying to move over. So I thought that was a really great goal for me. So I did my 5 years experience at IDE and Outerspace and went to Saturday classes and found a tutor and started learning Japanese. And in the meantime, I kept coming. The feeling got stronger and stronger over the years. And I started talking to recruiters and they were like, you really just need to be here. It's really hard to get hired from overseas. They haven't met you and they don't know really if you can live in Japan, if you can integrate into the culture, if you get used to it, maybe you won't like it, that kind of thing. That was a bit hard to take because I was like, man, that means giving up my career here without having any guarantee of what's going to happen. But I figured, what the hell, may as well give it a go. So I got a job teaching English and moved over here. About 6 weeks after I moved over here, COVID hit.
Whoa.
So it was amazing timing to be hit with COVID while you're trying to look for a job.
Yeah. God, that must have been crazy. They locked down pretty much straight away, didn't they, as well?
I had started teaching English and we basically got told to stay home. I kind of still had a job, but I didn't have to do any work for a while. So it was an interesting time where I could work on my portfolio and try and see if I could get a job, but nobody was hiring whatsoever. So I waited until the lockdowns were over. Then by that time, the company I was teaching with started catching on to the whole Zoom trend and we did Zoom lessons and stuff. It wasn't really until 2021 that I actually started seeing jobs being advertised and a bit of interest from people I was emailing. It was a hard year because I never expected it to take that long. You have lots of feelings about whether it's your fault, your skills aren't good enough, or are you ever going to be able to get a job? It's hard to keep up your confidence.
Absolutely. And then you're in a foreign country with a global pandemic.
Yeah.
And the Prime Minister saying, come home.
Yeah, plus you got way too long to think as well. You're just like, what's going on?
Yeah, that's right.
Enough for anyone to be incredibly stressed.
It wasn't the nicest time, but got there eventually. And actually, the way the pandemic went here in Japan, I didn't regret being here. It was quite a different approach to Australia. So we didn't have super strict lockdowns. We didn't have fines for going out or restrictions on how far from your house you could be or anything like that. It was pretty low key. So that was the nice part of it. Redacted.
As we understand it, you joined the industrial design department within Lenovo during COVID. What was your biggest challenge in those early days?
We were basically 100% remote at that time, or it was either that we were going in and out of what they call here state of emergencies. There was some months where we could go into the office once a week and other months where we couldn't go into the office at all. That was quite a hard way for me to start in a company being brand new and also the culture being quite different to anything I'd experienced before. Most of my colleagues are Japanese, but because we work with the design offices in the US and China, people have quite good levels of English as well. So it's bilingual. So that was really helpful. But it's hard to get to know people and get to know the projects, get to know the vibe. I'd done the internship at ResMed, which was a big company, but other than that, all of my experience had been in consultancies. So this was my first time working in-house. Besides my colleagues in Japan, I had a director and VP of design I was reporting to in the US, and there's the 13-hour time differences there. So it took a bit to get used to and settle in, but got there eventually. I think once COVID cleared up and I had started to find my feet in terms of my role, things got a lot better, and I was able to find ways that I could complement the team with my consultancy experience and their more in-house facing skill set.
In Lenovo, do you find yourself speaking more English or more Japanese most of the time?
It's hard to quantify. Locally, all of the meetings tend to be in Japanese, but it's really fluid. So, for example, we're having a meeting in Japanese and I want to say something. I might start it in Japanese, I might get stuck and switch to English. And then the person answering me might answer in English, and then we'll go back to speaking Japanese again. It really ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
We also have meetings with China and the US, and that's all done in English. So it's a real mix, but it's fun in that way. It's been a good way to both develop my language skills without it being too difficult. That's been really cool.
It sounds like you had the right advice. Definitely learning the language was very important to working in a company like that.
Yeah, definitely. I applied to Lenovo in English in terms of my written resume and everything, but the first phone call that I had with them was HR calling me to speak in Japanese and see what my Japanese level was like. Because even though they didn't have a super hard business level Japanese requirement, they wanted to know that you could at least have a bit of a conversation and communicate in Japanese. Definitely helps. Redacted.
Looking back, Lenovo is primarily known as a partner to IBM. What are the challenges of doing industrial design in an organization known for their computers?
On the IBM part, there's challenges, but there's also opportunities there. IBM Japan was originally owned by IBM America, and they were the ones that designed the ThinkPad, which is the brand that I work for. That means that the office has a long history of being an international place and having that American or Western culture there. I think that's a unique situation that makes it a bit of a better fit for me, but also unique in Japan in terms of the approach to design or to work. On the challenging side, because of that strong history, there's a lot of legacy there. ThinkPad is a real legacy brand. It's a brand that has a core fan base who don't want it to change. From the beginning, it had a strong design identity, and so it's important that we keep that identity there. And so that means that in some areas of our work, we don't have huge amount of scope to play with or to change. But then in some areas we do. We also have advanced design projects and a lot of innovative projects where we can be more creative and look further into the future. Kind of like a yin and a yang in that sense.
It would be similar to working at Porsche, right? Another one of those heritage brands where people love that iconic silhouette. And it's really like finding new discoveries within that silhouette.
Yes, absolutely. You want to respect that legacy, but you also want to make sure that it's modern and relevant in the coming years at the same time. That can be quite a challenge, but it can also be exciting.
It's really cool too. We had Tom Hardy on the podcast a couple of times, and he was saying that when he worked on the ThinkPad when he was at IBM, it was designed after a bento box.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is just so lovely, especially the way that you talk about the Japanese heritage throughout the design as well.
Yeah, that's right. And the bento box is something we still refer to today. So it's definitely part of the brand identity.
Very ahead of its time. I feel like everyone's talking about bento boxes in graphic design lately.
Yeah, wow. That's interesting.
So many bento boxes coming out. On the other side of it, there's the more legacy designs. One that I saw recently was the Z13. It just looked quite interesting. I'm looking at it now. Were you part of that project?
I was, yeah. I helped out with the CMF.
Could you get into a little bit about that?
That project was a unique opportunity to use CMF in a new way. We really wanted to lean into our efforts in sustainability and create a product that not only had sustainable processes and materials, but told a sustainable story. We wanted to create something that people would see and understand straight away that this was different and that this had something about it, a conversation-worthy piece. So we went for a composite, a natural composite on the A cover being the top cover of the laptop, and a recycled aluminium frame. And that flax composite piece is made from fiber that's left over from producing linen. Then it's bound together into quite a strong board that you can use in architectural or consumer electronics or any kind of flat surface. That was quite a cool journey of speaking to lots of different suppliers and doing lots of testing and experiments with a new material. We were really happy with the results. It's not the classic black ThinkPad that everybody knows, but something a bit different that gave us an opportunity to do a bit more sustainable material experimentation and try something new on the market.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's got that softness of the materiality in the same way that the Google Home and the Bang & Olufsen have that same vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as electronics become more integrated into our lives, there's no reason for them to be hard, cold objects. They can be as soft and personal as our clothing, as our interiors. Another thing with that is during the pandemic, everyone going hybrid and these two worlds of work and home really blurring meant that we had this opportunity to create products that look at PCs as more personal products. Yes, it's a commercial brand. Yes, ThinkPad is for workers, but those workers aren't necessarily in white-walled cubicle offices anymore. They're in their living rooms, which might be Scandi style or eclectic style or anything.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. Having a product's just a bit nicer to touch and almost a bit mindful and comforting, which definitely would have come about in the pandemic. Definitely keen to see more products like that. I think it was really interesting.
REDACTED.
What is the Lenovo design process and why do you do it this way?
Our design process is always evolving. It's not a super decided and stagnant thing, but there is a pattern to the year. We have products that come out each year, a certain portfolio that we're working on for that year. That work spans over, say, 6 to 8 months of the year. There's a bit of overlap with the other half of the year then, where rather than working on the specific products that are going into production, we look a bit further into the future and do a bunch of work around trends and advanced design. So the cycle goes on. You do the trends and advanced design work at the beginning of the year, and then that leads you into the production phase for the second half of the year, and then you keep rotating around. For the production, we have these stage gates, which is where we present to the executives what we're intending to do for that year, which focus points we're focusing on, and which products we want to integrate innovation into. That helps us to get a go, no go from different stakeholders, be it marketing or engineering and development as we go along. I'm more of a front end and process person. So my involvement in the production side of things is either usually through CMF or through some sort of cross portfolio initiative where I'm helping the team get consistency across the different products. But the majority of my focus is on that trend and advance side of the projects, where I'm more trying to look forward and understand where the brand is going to be heading, where our products need to be focusing, and getting our vision and storytelling right for the coming year.
Could you walk us through a little bit of that trend finding between start and finish of the trends process?
We work with forecasting agencies and each year get an update of the major macro trends that we're looking at. Macro trends tend to be around for a 5 to 10 year time frame, but they do evolve slightly every year or every 2 years as the situation around the world changes. We keep up to date with those trends all year round, but we do get a big report and focus on them at the beginning of the year. Basically, my role is to take those trends and work with the design team and get them to both understand the trends, but also have some ownership over them as well, and reflect a bit on their own lives, what they're seeing around them here in Japan, and how they're seeing those trends play out and what they think those trends mean for our brand. So we go from the macro and come down thinking about workers working hybrid or in offices, and thinking about our brand, and then thinking about our product, and filter down from the trends down to the specifics of what we're doing.
Cool. I've always wondered about that. Where do these trends come from and who researches that and how does it end up in products? So yeah, that's cool to hear about.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because the trends aren't really product specific. They're everything from climate change to what's happening on TikTok or in fashion houses or in architecture. But you can definitely see the zeitgeist, what's happening in the world, what people are feeling about certain environmental or cultural phenomena. It's not necessarily that something like that tells you how to design a product, but that you can use that information to reflect on your brand and your products and how you think your product might sit in the future. Sustainability is a really interesting one. We started all thinking about sustainable materials in terms of, can we recycle it or can we make it out of natural or recycled materials? That's evolved now, where even though those things are important, you're getting a lot of government action on repairability, giving users the right to repair. You can't glue things together anymore. You need to be able to open them up. As we move forward, I think the trends and how they get interpreted into products and into legislation changes slightly year by year and evolves. So it's really important to keep up with what's happening as product designers.
The trend forecasting is so interesting as well. I've only worked with WGSN, but it's not like some person sitting there with a crystal ball. It's actually quantifiable data that they send people out all around the world to track these things. Butter yellow has been gaining interest over the last 3 years. It's had a 26% rise year on year, and we're suspecting it's going to be that color of the summer because of this data. And then you get to incorporate the data geek within you and the intuition and where you want to sit in the market. And maybe you want to follow the trend. Maybe you want to stand out from the trend.
It's definitely all about that aggregation and synthesizing bits of information that are building up over time, and then you can create a trajectory. Like you said, it's not a crystal ball. The data is pointing this way.
Yeah, and people say trend like it's such a dirty word, I've found. But I actually find it really interesting watching the trends come, they go, maybe they peak for a little bit, they drop down and then they come back more than ever.
As you said, it's a full cultural vision in some of those reports. Quite interesting.
I also think CMF is such an interesting play in that as well. For a lot of people, it's quite overlooked. But for me, I feel like it can really make or break a product.
Definitely. One of the biggest interaction points between the user and the product is what material it's made from and what color it is and how it feels to touch. It's really important.
I also think it's so underrated as well. I work almost exclusively in plastic, and depending on the texture breakup we use can really make the product shine, make it look a lot better quality, even though it's ultimately made out of the same material. Might make it look like it's going to last longer. The texture on it might actually make it last longer because it's not going to scratch. I find it really interesting, especially as it's not necessarily something that costs a lot more in manufacture.
It's a great value add in that sense.
Speaking of value adds, how do you convince others that trend research is a value add? And how's this changed from when you started in 2013 to where you are now?
In the early days, 2013 to 2020, I was in consultancies, and the trend research in that environment is both really valuable to the team, but it's also really valuable to the clients at a consultancy. In my work, we had a lot of startups and new brands being created in the products that we were designing. So the trend research wasn't only informing how the product was designed, but it was also informing the brand and the brand positioning, and the whole environment that that product was going to go into is really affected by those trends. In consulting, it can be a hard sell to put time to trends and get people paying for the research. But if you can, in a consultancy environment, have a design team which is already pretty tapped into the trends and it's a natural part of their design process, then they are adding to the value of the projects without necessarily billing for hours and hours of research. That's the ideal way for it to work. When it comes to in-house, the way the budgets and projects work, it's a bit different. It's not as challenging to spend time on trends and trends research. But I think one missed opportunity is that anyone in a strong brand, large manufacturer type company could be looking at trends and could be taking an interest in trends, but it's often just the designers that are doing it. I think as a design team, we have the opportunity to almost educate or help put a framework around, put some words and research to the trends that are happening for the other parts of the company, whether it be marketing or publicity or anything like that. Often when we present trends to other stakeholders, they're seeing them for the first time. So that's a bit of a lost opportunity.
Because we're also immersed in the design culture and just looking at objects for the sake of looking at them. I feel like naturally we're going to stumble across these things before other people. And like you said, it could very well be the first time people are coming on board with this new trend.
Redacted.
Can you share a project where the choice of color, material, or finish had a significant impact on the user experience or the success of the design?
The Z13 that we were chatting about earlier is a really good example of that, where it's still a PC, still works exactly like a ThinkPad as you'd expect. But from the user experience side of things, that material completely changes the character of the product and the feel of the product in your hands, and also the story of the product as you get to talk about it with other people. I think that's a good example of what a difference CMF can make.
Just out of curiosity, what was that composite that you guys used?
It's a flax composite, as in linen, or flax seeds. You eat the seeds as well, that same plant.
Wow, that's cool.
Konnichiwa, Mariku Nancy desu. この番組は REDACTED です。
You've worked in Australia and you've worked in Japan for a significant amount of time. What would you say would be the weaknesses of Australian or Japanese design culture, and what are their strengths?
I think there's two big differences between Japan and Australia. The first one is the market size. I am in Tokyo. It's not that different to the size of Melbourne or Sydney in geography, but it has the entire population of Australia here in one city. And the population of Japan is 5 times the population of Australia. On market size, the amount of people that you're marketing a product to is completely different. There's a completely different scale. Culturally as well, I don't want to be harsh on Australia, but there's a rich history of aesthetics and design here in Japan that I think Australia doesn't really have, especially in a market sense. The cultural interest in design and refinement is on another level here to what I felt in Australia. It means that not only is the market really huge here, but there's actually just a lot of variation in what's available. If you go looking for anything, I remember being on holidays here and forgetting my toothbrush, and I went to buy a toothbrush, and it was just insane, the variation and variety of toothbrushes you could get from any shop. They had things that were round, this is gross, but the shape of a toilet brush, but miniature. They had ones with 3 heads or 2 heads, all sorts of crazy, weird stuff here.
So you can get all 3 sides of your teeth at once.
Exactly. In some senses, they're not amazing design products. I'm not trying to say the toothbrush design here is amazing or anything like that. I'm just trying to highlight that the market size here means there's a real variety of products available. And so that obviously influences the design culture of what opportunities are available and what you can create that's actually viable in a business sense.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really good point because in Australia, it is quite limiting. The commerciality of the product is so important. And there are so many places that will only do things that they know are going to be commercially viable by following what people have done before.
Yeah, playing it safe, one for all.
Yes, yeah, I think so too. The other big difference, as well as the size of the market here, there's also a long history of manufacturing. When you think about the brands here, we're talking about cars, Mitsubishi, Mazda, Toyota,
Suzuki,
I think Subaru as well, maybe, I'm not sure. And then you've got Toshiba, Sony, and Panasonic, and back in the day, Sanyo. There's a lot of big manufacturers. That's the majority of the work. And I didn't realize that coming here, but there's these huge manufacturers that have pretty big design teams. And as you can imagine, in that environment, a lot of the design work is going to be quite iterative. It's going to be about creating the next iteration of their products. When you look at the super creative, interesting stuff that is very uniquely Japanese, that's often coming out of solo designers or very, very tiny studios, maybe 2 people, maybe 3 people. There's actually not a lot in between. So I think the mid-sized consultancies that are in Australia are more rare here than I expected.
Oh, that's interesting.
And a lot of the jobs are in-house, large manufacturing companies. So that also affects the design culture and the experience that a lot of the designers have. It's standard or expected that if you're an industrial designer in Japan, that you'll be at a large manufacturer. That's the path for most people in our field. Whereas I think in Australia, because we don't have that manufacturing there is that large variation. Industrial design is a very small field, but there's a lot of variety.
I feel like most of the industrial designers that I seem to meet work consultancy. I always feel like I'm a bit of an outlier because I'm in-house.
Where are you working, Lucy?
I work for a plastics manufacturer. I mostly design white label homewares for Kmart, Target USA, Officeworks, Bunnings, that sort of thing. Meet with them, do the product development process with them, and then we manufacture it.
Yeah, wow. So there is some manufacturing in Australia.
Oh, we can dream.
Yeah, one day.
Our factories are mostly in China and Vietnam.
Manufacturer overseas.
Okay.
At some of these large companies that are over there, I know you've said Lenovo has quite a good working culture, but is it quite common for some of these Japanese companies to have quite strict time or having to work very late or working on the weekends and things like that? Quite stressful work cultures?
To be honest, I don't know a lot about other industrial design companies, but I have a friend who is an interior designer and another one is a graphic designer who have both worked at large Japanese companies. They're now both freelance for exactly that reason that you're alluding to. Culturally and traditionally, yes, there is a lot of overtime here and there's a lot of hierarchy as well. It can be pretty challenging, especially for our generation, I think, is fighting against that a bit. And the culture is slowly changing. I don't know what's happened in Australia post-pandemic, but I think the pandemic also gave a lot of people the opportunity to stay hybrid here. Some of the companies might have gone back full-time, but a lot of the companies here are still hybrid. And that gives a bit of a better balance to people who might find the office quite intense otherwise.
We're going through a really weird stage at the moment where a lot of people stayed working from home, working hybrid, but because of our small population, the cities all started to empty out and clear out, and it was really terrible for business. So the government are just in the process of forcing all the government employees back.
Oh, okay.
Which I think is a really risky move. I feel like it's just going to make people not want to work for the government. I would be looking for a new job if that was me.
Yeah, not just the government. I think a lot of companies are trying to get people back into the office as well. I'm not exactly sure why. It might be a productivity thing, but they seem to be pushing, oh no, come back to the office now. You've had your fun. I think it's still a lot easier to work from home hybridly than it was, I'd say.
Also, just recently, Australia passed the right to disconnect law. So, at least for the time being in big companies, employees have the right to not answer emails, messages, or calls out of hours.
In itself is kind of crazy that only now they said, oh, when you're not at work, we don't expect you to answer the phone.
It's good that it's happened now, but yeah, crazy that it was happening for so long, I guess.
Redacted.
What has been a significant change or challenge you've found working in Japan versus working in Australia?
As I mentioned, a lot of the jobs here are in-house. I'm now in an in-house position, but it also means that a lot of my colleagues are working in-house. Not to generalize about people working in-house, I think it might be more specifically in a Japanese context, but it means that a lot of my colleagues, their skill set and the majority of their work is in detail design. And me coming into Lenovo without that background, and also just myself personally, my own interests and my natural skill set is more in the front end and conceptual vision setting side of things. That makes me both rare here, which I guess is a good thing, but it means that I'm a culture add, but not a culture fit in that sense. It means that my mindset and the way that I like to work is not the same as the rest of my colleagues. It's been a bit difficult for me. It's a little bit challenging for me at times, but it's also been a real asset at the same time because I've been able to add something new to the team. And I've also inevitably become a bit of a cross-cultural connector between the Japanese team and the Chinese team and also the US team as well. I think that's probably something that if any listeners out there as designers are interested in working overseas, it's something I hear from a lot of other people here, whether they're in design or not, is that if you are bilingual and have that experience in Western countries, that you do often end up being this cross-cultural connector or coordinator in a sense, because it's a rare opportunity to have someone like that. Sometimes I think maybe I should be doing more design work. I'm doing a lot of coordination work, but I think that's what's needed in the team at the moment. Redacted.
What's the dream goal for Lenovo design team? And going deeper, what's your dream goal?
There's two big things that come to mind for the Lenovo design team. One, as we've already talked about, is sustainability. I think as designers, we're all aware that we're creating these boxes of electronics that have the potential to end up as e-waste, and there's limited resources, and we don't want to add to the problem anymore that already is. The team is really motivated by sustainability and wanting ways not only to make the product more sustainable to start with, but to really prolong its life and make sure it's repairable, and also design it in such a way that people want to keep it for a long time and repair it and treasure it. The other thing that comes to mind is AI. AI is making such fast advances at the moment that we're all wondering and dreaming about what the future of laptops, of computers, and of white-collar work is going to be. It's definitely something that's on our minds at the moment, and I think we're all hoping to be at the forefront of that and hoping to create some great innovation that's really useful for people for the future of work and the future of productivity. That's another big dream of ours. My dream goal is just to make a positive impact as a designer. I know everyone says they want to do something for the good of the world. I think that's human nature. We don't want to create bad things, but as designers, we have this opportunity to create beauty in our products and also just in teamwork. It's a collaborative job. As a designer, even though you're focusing on the products, you have this opportunity to create good energy and synergy with other designers and a good working environment. It's not necessarily that it's a dream of mine, but my goal as a designer, especially here in a new culture, is to just work well in collaboration and create some excitement and some creative energy with the people that I'm working with.
I think that's really good. A lot of the time you see individualism being advertised as what everyone sees in designers, these big designers, but a lot of people don't understand that design is super collaborative and you can't do good design without the help of a network or a team. I think that's really cool.
It's not just the designers too, right? What you're saying reminded me, there's the engineers, there's the marketing department, so many people are involved. But I think it's something that I really realized in this role because I'm not responsible for one particular product. I'm working across products and doing a lot of project leadership and coordination. I've had to change my mindset as a designer that I don't have to have a product to my name that was, this is the thing I designed, but it's more about the design team as a whole and having a successful and creative, fun experience of designing those products, not just the end.
Once you finally get that final item, whether you were the head designer with the concept or you were just part of the team who were getting the job done, it's almost like looking into a time machine and you remember all those hard conversations where you fought for that thing that turned out to be awesome. And it's just this overwhelming flood of pride in the product.
It's a nice way to put it.
And building upon that, what advice would you give your younger self just starting their career?
Find a trusted senior designer who you can have the conversations with, and don't be afraid to have those harder conversations if you're doubting the viability of a product or just if you have instinct about something. Being able to chat that over with senior designers as a junior designer, I think you learn so much. Having safe spaces where you can speak up. If you're a young designer, it might not be that you want to ask those difficult questions of the client themselves, but not being afraid to talk to people on your team about any concerns you're having about the project or the project direction. There's so much that young designers, fresh designers can bring to the table, especially in an in-house environment. When we get new grads coming into Lenovo, the ideas that they come up with are just so fresh and so left field that it's really great for the rest of the team to see a completely different perspective. Find people that you feel safe showing those ideas to or voicing those concerns or asking those questions, I think is definitely really valuable to a young person, a young designer, and helps you feel like if things don't go well, then you did your part. You brought up ideas or you brought up the concerns and you've done your bit, 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 done your bit.
Thank you, Nancy, for joining us on the show today. It's been incredible to hear your story. We've enjoyed it and we're confident that the audience will too.
Thank you. I enjoyed talking to you too.
For our listeners, don't forget to check out the show notes for links to anything we've mentioned, where to follow the show, see Nancy's or Lenovo's work, plus the discounts from our sponsor, PCBWay. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, this has been REDACTED.
The number you have dialed has not been recognized. Please check and try again. The number you have dialed has been
redacted, 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 redacted.